We're in the midst of a brand new series. In fact, we're on the first week of a series that we're going to be using the very popular Alpha curriculum during the worship services, and then we're going to go back to the basics during our small groups. It's going to be 9 weeks, and every week we're going to address one extremely important question. We want to challenge you one last time to get into a small group because you'll get to experience the entire adventure if you do that. Some of you have signed up for a small group and you don't know which group you're in yet. Meet me out in the hub afterwards, and I'd be glad to do that. We also want to make it possible for anybody that's struggling, that wants to reach out and just take that risk to join a group. Pastor Dan is going to do one on Sunday night in Dunn Brothers. So if you just need the comfort of knowing somebody, then there's one last chance for you to get in, sign up, and we'd love to have you enjoy the journey with us. As I was preparing for the sermon, I was thinking about a young lady, and she met this guy, and she really liked him. He had all of the attributes that she was interested in. He was gentle, and he was kind, and he was patient, and he wasn't a Packers fan. As she was developing the relationship, she wanted to grow closer to him, so she was asking him some questions, and she said, "Tell me about your goals." And he said, "I only have 3 goals." And here were his goals. He said, "What I want to do is I want to be able to keep my present job. I want to be able to fix my pickup truck, and I want to stop making the same mistake over and over and over again." The young lady knew something was missing, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it, so she invited the young man over to her house. And everything was going pretty well as they were having dinner. It was just casual conversation. But after the meal ended, her father wanted to find out more about this boy that she was dating. So he started asking him some questions like, "Tell me about your aspirations, your dreams, your goals." And he said the exact same three things. He said, "I simply just want to keep my present job. I want to fix my pickup truck, and I want to stop making the same mistake over and over." So the mom said, "Tell us about your job." And he said, "Well, I work for minimum wage at the local restaurant." And then the dad said, "Well, what's wrong with your pickup truck?" He said, "I have a 1998 Ford Ranger pickup truck, and it needs a starter, and I need to really make sure that I can get rid of these bald tires." And then the mom calmly said to him, "Tell us what mistake you keep making over and over and over again." And he said, "Well, over the last 3 years, there's been 2 other girls that I have gotten pregnant." Now, when something's missing, don't you think you should pay attention to that? If I was the father of that young lady and we had had that conversation, I would hope that she would pay attention to that. Do you know what we tend to do when something's missing? What we do is we ignore it. We distract ourselves, or very few of us actually address it. We ignore it and pretend it'll go away. We distract ourselves by getting busy doing something else, like watching TV, but not very often do we address it. The question that we're going to be wrestling with this morning is there more to this life than this? Every single one of us have addressed the question, and not often do we realize how important that question is. Sometimes the question comes through a painful event. There was a guy named Fred, and he came into my office, and he poured out his heart, and after being married for 25 years, his wife came home to him. And she said, "Honey, I don't love you anymore, and I just want you to know before you get the papers that I filed for a divorce yesterday, and you should be getting them very soon." Another guy named Nate came into my office, and he had been working for a company for 10 years, and he had poured his heart and soul out to this company. And the boss called him into the office, and he put his head down, and I want to read to you what he said because I just sat there in stunned silence as he said this to me. He said, "I stayed up at night trying to figure out ways to make this company more successful. The last words that my boss said to me were, 'You need to gather your things on your way out and make sure you sign the paperwork or we will not be able to give you the 2 weeks severance pay.'" Sometimes we're able to wrestle with that question. Is there more to this life than this? Sometimes it's not a painful event. It's a lingering illness or an untimely death or an unachieved goal or a broken relationship or a severed friendship. all of those can bring on the feeling. Sometimes that subtle feeling that you just need to slow down to notice. It's a quiet ache in your soul that whispers that something is missing. There is a lingering feeling that something's not right. It's an internal, vague, indistinct, pervasive feeling of angst. Sometimes there's no external circumstances at all. Sometimes everything in life is going smoothly. We have a good job. We have good health. We enjoy our spouse. We like our kids. We like what we're doing, but there's still something missing. Is there more to this life than this? If you're courageous and if you are willing to address the question, you might come up with something profound. I think that it's a personal question. And what it's asking is, what do I do with this dissatisfaction in my soul? Have you ever had it? Have you ever had just an underlying, vague feeling that something's just not right? Maybe it's a global question. Maybe the question is about eternity and finding ultimate meaning. Is there something outside of myself that can provide me with answers to my questions? Everywhere I go, people are exhausted. And I'm not talking just physically. They're emotionally exhausted because of the pace of life, because of the demands. We live in a culture that constantly drives us to compete and to perform and to be able to do more than we have the capacity to accomplish. I love how Solomon was able to experience the exact same feeling. Watch what he said in Ecclesiastes chapter 2. For a man may do his work with wisdom, knowledge, and skill, and then he must leave all that he owns to someone who has not worked for it. I have to work every ounce of my energy, and I don't even get to keep it. This, too, is meaningless and great misfortune. What does a man get for all the toil and anxious striving with which he labors under the sun? All of his days, his work is pain and grief, even at night. His mind does not rest. This too is meaningless. I work as hard as I can all day long, and then I'm left staying up at night worrying about everything I did, and I can't even keep all the things that I have. There's something missing. There's something elusive. What I call it is a rat race. A rat race is a pointless pursuit that no matter how far you try to get somewhere, you never accomplish what you actually wished you could. Here's the rat race that we live in America. A person's born, they go to school, get a job, get married, have a family, continue to work, retire, and then die. Is there more to this life than just that? Solomon continues in chapter 2, verse 24. A man could do nothing better than eat and drink and find satisfaction in his work. This, too, I see, is from the hand of God. For without him, without God, who can eat or find enjoyment? To the man who pleases him, that's God, God gives him wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. I love this. If you please God, he'll give you wisdom, knowledge, and happiness. Watch this part here, though. But to the sinner, he gives the task of gathering and storing up wealth so that he can hand it over to the one who pleases God. This, too, is meaningless. Solomon would say, no matter how smart, no matter how intelligent, no matter how hard you work, if all you do is work to accomplish something, you will have a deep sense that something is missing. He says that the philosophy that begins and exists and ends in the dust and then says that the dust is everything, that's a meaningless chasing after the wind. If I was to rephrase that in our modern vernacular, it would be something like this, that the only way that you can experience what you're looking for is through a connected relationship through the source of life. Lasting satisfaction will never come through people, things, and accomplishment. And I don't care how good your job is. I don't care how much you accomplish or how pleased people are with you. There is something inside of us that just is aching. And my question that I want you to consider today is there more to this life than this? When we start to wrestle with the question, we can ignore it. We can pretend like it doesn't really matter. We can distract ourselves with other things, or we can lean into the question and wait until we get an answer. Is there more to this life than this? If you have courage and you're willing to address it, then you're going to have to ask some difficult questions. But in order for us to do this, we have to be able to overcome our fear. Because when we start to think about these questions, it brings up all kinds of complexities. Where do I come from? Where am I going? Who am I? Does my life have any ultimate meaning? What is my purpose? What happens when I die? These are all big questions that we will only get to if we're willing to move through our fears. I want to suggest, at least for me, that only Jesus can answer the most compelling questions in life. If I were to have a meal with each of you and sit down across the table and talk to you, some of you would tell me that you're not a Christian. And you would have some personal objections. For you, some of the objections you would have, and I've heard this before from people. In fact, I talked to this young lady, and it's hard to imagine, but a long time ago, I was a youth pastor. And she came up to me and she said, Bob, I don't want to be a Christian. And I said, why is that? And she said, because it's boring. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, when I read the Bible, it looks like we're going to be going to heaven and all we're going to do is be singing. And whenever I go to church and we sing, it's the most boring thing I could ever imagine. To thought of doing that throughout eternity, that is so terrorizing. I don't want any part of that. Other people have said it's irrelevant. Some of you have intellectual questions that just drive you, and you wonder, does that mean if I was to decide to follow Christ that I would have to be able to go against certain scientific things? Other people wrestle with the Bible. Can I trust it? Is it reliable? Some people have emotional questions, and the emotional questions are things like this. What about suffering and pain and evil? And I want you to know that over the next 9 weeks, we're going to do our best to address those questions in a meaningful way. Some of you, the questions are both personal and emotional. And for you, there came a time in your life when you reached out to God and you took a risk and you prayed, and God did not come through for you. I want to kind of lay my cards on the table and tell you what my agenda is so that you don't feel like we're trying to bait and switch you. My agenda for the sermon and our agenda as a church for this series is simply that we would create a safe environment for questions. I want to say that again. What we want to do as a church is to create a safe environment for questions. Some of you have questions that are gnawing at your soul. And if you're a believer or not, I want you to pay attention to those questions because they're important. What we want to let you know up front is that your questions matter, and we care about the fact that you have questions. And I want you to lean into that question, not move away from it. And I want to compel some of the people that are believers here that when people come forward, and they will, and people want to talk about their gnawing ache and questions and the things they don't really believe and the things that they're struggling with, please do not give them religious pat answers. Please do not ridicule or shame or talk down to anybody that takes a risk and is willing to share the struggle and the gnawing that's going on inside their soul. And some of you, the main thing that you resist when it comes to God is that's what's happened to you. There are things that you had that were fact-based answers, and people were only willing to give you faith-based answers, and that kept you from God. I want to appeal to you if you're not a believer. And what I want to ask you is, would you be willing to, I'm not asking you to open the door, I'm asking you, would you be willing to have the crack just open a little and give God some consideration? I want to talk to you that are already believers and you still have 9 questions. And when you address, is there something more than this? You know when you're quiet and when you're by yourself that you're not quite satisfied with your life. And I would ask you to pay attention to that, because the answer to that question might draw you to what God wants to do through you. I would want nothing more than you to be able to trust God with all of your heart and follow Him with your entire being. Before you discount God, I want you to consider that the Father and the Son make some pretty bold claims. In Jeremiah chapter 2, verse 3, the prophet's talking about God, and he says that we were never intended to be the source of our own fulfillment. I love this passage. My people have committed 2 sins. They have forsaken me, the spring of living water, and have dug their own cistern, broken cisterns that can't hold water. Instead of coming to me, a life-giving source, they dug a hole in the ground that leaks, and they expect that to meet their ultimate longings. In John chapter 4, to a young woman at a well in the middle of the day because she didn't want to be around anyone else, Jesus said the most profound thing to her. He said that thirst that you're hungering for, I can give you living water. I can satisfy you at the deepest, most desperate longings. And you will never thirst again. In verse 14, is there more to this life than this? What if? I want you to dream with me. I want you to just ask this question and let it sit with you for a second. But what if we were created by God with an inner passion to live a life to make a difference? What if God put a desire in us to do something meaningful and significant, and if we don't pay attention to it, we might miss what God has for us? Every single one of us was created with a need for affection, belonging, and significance. There is not a better compliment you could pay a person than to say, you made a difference in my life. Not that long ago, I was at a funeral for Elaine, one of the ladies in our church, and her granddaughter made me cry during the service, and what she said was, my grandma made a difference in my life. What if we were created by God to be loved at the very core of our being? What if one day there's a God and He wants to speak into your soul and He wants to say that I love you, I made you, I care about you, I desire to be able to speak to those deep, dark longings and say over your soul, I take great delight in you. Why should you crack open the door and give God some consideration? I think because only Jesus can satisfy the deepest longings of your soul. If you read through John, he goes through the I am passages and he says, I'm the bread of life. I can satisfy your hunger. I'm the light of the world. I can help you to go where you need to go. I'm the door, the good shepherd. I'm the resurrection and the life. I'm the way, the truth, and the life. I am the true vine. In John chapter 14, starting in verse 1, Jesus is talking to his disciples, and they're wrestling. And they know that Jesus is about to leave them, and they're terrified and they're afraid. And he says something that only someone who has incredible ability to reach in past our fears could ever say. He says, don't let your hearts be troubled. Watch this. Don't let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If it were not so, I would have told you. I'm going to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come back and I will take you unto myself. The old translations say many mansions, and I don't think it's talking about mansions. I think what it's talking about is that Jesus knows exactly how to get to the Father, and he wants you to be able to experience a deep, abiding connection with the source of life. And Jesus is about to say something so powerful, so profound. He doesn't say, I know the way to God. He doesn't say, I can tell you how to do it. He says something even more profound. He says, I am the way. And the only way I can describe this is if you're in a jungle in Africa and you have to go somewhere and you have no idea how to get there. And your guide comes and he says, I'm the way. Follow me. Watch what he says. Jesus is talking to his disciples. He says, you know the way to the place where I'm going? And Thomas says what I wish all of us would is we would ask the questions that are in our heart, but we're afraid. Lord, we don't know the way. How in the world can we know the way? Jesus answered, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Is there more to this life than this? Jesus is the direction for the lost, stability for the confused, and hope for the discouraged. I want to talk kind of face to face with you just for a second, okay? We have those intellectual questions and we have those emotional questions. But do you know what I found that keeps people from God more than anything else? It's fear. We're afraid that if we move into the questions, then we're going to have to deal with what's going on. Let me give you a couple of them. Sometimes when we move closer to God, what it means is that we're going to have to admit that we made some mistakes. Some of you have done some things that have hurt some people in the past. And when you hurt people, you weren't by yourself, you were with other people. And if you're willing to move into the question and go past the unsettling thing and get past the cultural rhetoric that tells us that everybody makes mistakes, then you're going to have to acknowledge that you actually made some mistakes and you hurt some people. Just what if? What if there is a God that if you move into those ultimate questions could forgive you? What if there's a God that could erase what has happened to you and could allow you to experience Him? Others of us, it's not about the mistakes we made, but it's about the autonomy that we want to live. If we acknowledge that there is a God, then that would mean that we have to be accountable to Him. And I don't know about you, but I don't like having anybody else in charge of me except for me. A couple other controlling people besides me in the room. Why should you open the door to God? Because He's the only one that can answer the most compelling questions. He's the only one that can satisfy your deepest longings. And He's the only one that can help us move into our fears so that He can actually solve our deepest problems. Is there more to this life than this? Would you pray with me? Dear Heavenly Father, everybody in here knows that there's something missing. My prayer, God, is that today we wouldn't ignore it and pretend like it's not there. God, my prayer is that we wouldn't distract ourselves with watching the Vikings and the Steelers or the Broncos and the Cowboys or some other TV show. But we would let the question sit. God, the question seems like it's going to come and shake up our entire world and tell us that we've made massive mistakes and we're going to have to change everything. But God, maybe if we sit with it long enough, we'll realize that the thing that we've been missing is you. God, I pray this church would be a place that's safe for people to ask questions. God, I pray it would be a place that's free of judgment or condemnation and people who are self-righteous and arrogant. God, I pray that we would be open to your Spirit, and I know there are people in here, God, that don't know you. God, there are people here that know you, but there's a gnawing ache in their soul. Give them the courage, God, to pay attention to it today. In Jesus' precious and holy name, amen.